Greetings and welcome to this session. In this particular session, as I work on this troll ink drawing in the background, I'll be rambling about AI art and how it has seemed to fall off into the ether. Artists and our need to simply put things out of our minds so we can keep working. And then something about a cat. So thanks for tuning in, and feel free to subscribe and draw along. Let's get started. I've been thinking about AI art again. I know, it is one of those topics that kind of keeps coming and going, and it's annoying and it's scary and all these other things that just kind of keep pulling it back out of the ether. But mostly I was curious because a couple of videos and things started showing up in my feed again, but most of them are old. And it feels a little bit like the AI art discussion, the concerns were very large for a small portion of time and then kind of fell off the radar at some point. I noticed in the last couple days as I've been looking at things on Instagram that it's still there, it's still prevalent, but not perhaps as prevalent as it once was, and it just feels a little bit odd. I don't know if as the legal things have been shifting in the United States, the Copyright Office came out and said that their recommendation is, or from their perspective, it is that you can't copyright anything that was specifically created in an artificial intelligence engine. And a lot of the big gaming companies and concept art houses have basically said we're not going to use any material from any AI art generators. And I think the logic there is basically, it seems like some copyright issues might be shifting, and I think just the large companies don't want to deal with potential legal just issues. They don't want to deal with any of these potential issues that might come out of this, and so they're refraining at this time they're refraining from utilizing it. And so it seems like maybe there have been some positive movements, and that's what's pulled it out of the public discourse. I think what's probably more likely, though, and is unfortunate, but it's part of life, is I think probably people were just feeling fatigued by the negativity and the depression that comes on from having to deal with that subject matter continually for such a long period of time. And this happens a lot where we as humans are not particularly resilient when it comes to dealing with the same negative topics or pessimistic topics for a long period of time. And for several months, the AI art was this large, overwhelming part of the art conversation. Are we all going to have our jobs in the near future? Is all of this going to go away? And all of those conversations are still prudent and they still exist, but it's almost like we as an art population became fatigued with that conversation. And it makes sense. It's hard to continually sit in this negative headspace. And I've experienced this in my own personal life, and I've seen this in the lives of my friends when there's been a medical issue of some kind, or a couple struggling with something as heartbreaking as infertility. Is people have concerns and they care for a long time, and then they become fatigued with concern for that health matter, or for somebody trying to have kids, or whatever it might be. And at a certain point, people just fall off. And I've got some people in my life that have some very debilitating diseases, and some that they're not quite as debilitating, but they just are omnipresent. They never go away, and they affect every aspect of life. And it's interesting to watch that everyone is so concerned around diagnosis, and then it just kind of falls off. And then years hence, people will just throw out a comment every once in a while like, is he still struggling with that? Does she still have that? And I don't know, I'm over contemplative, so in my mind I'm like, well, of course, it's not like this goes away. This is an autoimmune thing, or this is a gut thing, or this is a life thing. Like, it's not going to change. But it seems like we as humans, with all of our good intentions, we only have so much energy that we can dedicate to things that are difficult, things of this caliber. And so I fear that might be what has happened with the AI art conversation. And when I hear Steven Zapata talk about it, when Adam Duff brings it back up, when Kelsey Rodriguez mentions things, the indication is positive movement is taking place, but that the battle is not over, that it's not done. And I think just the public outside of the art world is probably on to the next thing. Like, the AI art thing was cool for a while. Now we're whatever the next toy is. And I'm just not in the loop enough to know what that next toy is. But it seems like the artists have also kind of gone away from it because it didn't immediately destroy everything. And, you know, so much of our art making is tied into our emotions and where we are in a particular moment. And so if we stay in that negativity, we're not going to be able to create things. And I think that the rational aspect too is just self-preservation, that we've got to get to a point where we can exist and we can like find joy in the day to day. And if we're constantly contemplating whether art is going to matter at all in the next couple of years, then that makes it really hard and difficult to enjoy each of these particular moments that come in our lives. And that's a fight for so many of us every day anyway, that when you throw on the gasoline on the fire that is AI art, it makes everything a little bit more treacherous. So I've just been curious about that. I've been contemplating as I work on my art, as I continue to listen to videos and podcasts and all kinds of things about this. It seems like something has changed, but mostly I think that the community has just become fatigued with the conversation. So of course I'm doing the logical thing here and bringing it back up because that always goes really well. There is one thing though that has been pretty positive, not just two things actually. The Copyright Office ruling that you can't copyright things that were specifically devised inside of artificial intelligence systems is lovely, and I'm not sure how that'll fully transpire once it's done, but it seems, at least for the moment, that it's going to create a hiccup, which is, I think, what we need. We need this time for artists and the art community to negotiate, and this has at least set some manner of precedence. It's going to provide some more time for things to be negotiated, for things to happen at the state and federal level where it needs to. The other positive thing is the glazing application, which Steven Zapata has talked about several times. And it's basically just something that you as an artist, if you are prominent enough that your work is being taken and put into these systems, that you can run this filter over the top of your art. It alters it in just very slight ways, and it makes it not indecipherable to the artificial intelligence, but it allows the artificial intelligence some trouble in interpreting what that thing is, and it's basically not a usable data point. And so again, that's a beneficial thing in the short term. I think that long term, we're probably going to need some different solutions. And looking at the music industry and how it's handled it, where it's got so much money behind it that there's an industry, and the industry is then able to go to bat for the individual musicians because there's so much money tied up in that. Well, artists don't have something like that. We don't have a system that protects us because we're not unified. And so I don't have any clue what this would look like, but it makes me curious if we might see a return to guilds of some kind, if we might see some kind of coalescence of artists on a larger scale that could allow us to fight large-scale legal battles together. And I don't know what this would look like. It could look something like the teachers union, where every teacher pays a little bit of money into it, and then there's some administrative staff, and basically at any point where there's a large-scale negotiation at the state or federal level, that you've got, millions of dollars that can be dumped into legal battles to do what's best for teachers. Hypothetically, what's best for teachers. So I don't know. I mean, could artists do that? Imagine how crazy that would be, right? For artists to unionize in some capacity, where, all of the YouTube artists and Instagram artists, there's just an option once you start making money, perhaps, to donate a small percentage to the artists union, the artists guild, and then basically that money, is representative of us. We've got almost like elected officials inside of that system, and then they can advocate for us. I don't know. I mean, I don't think that the way that the artist system is structured right now that would support that, but it's a really interesting thing to think about and to process. And I wonder if something like that would be beneficial, that we might see a need for that, or I hope we don't get to a situation where we look back retroactively and go, that would have been good and we didn't do that and now we're screwed. But it's just, yeah, there's a lot of things that I've been processing the last week or so thinking about AI art, because not nobody, I don't want to speak in absolutes, but fewer people have been talking about it. And so I'm just curious, like, why are fewer people talking about it? And that's just, like, again, that weird glimpse into my brain where it's just, I'm so naturally contrarian that, like, everyone's positive about this. Like, well, but should they be? I'm not, it's not me being smarter. It's me being less content. I would not recommend it. I would not recommend over-contemplating every part of your life. It is not the secret to happiness. So I'm also, like, just this tiny little point on the end of this section here with AI art, but I'm curious, at what point is there so much AI art that the AI art generators start feeding on themselves? They start cannibalizing themselves, and we get this weird degradation. Because I think that you're getting all of these human inputs right now because there's so much of it. But at a certain point, the AI art will massively and completely overwhelm the human art just in terms of quantity. And if the systems like Midjourney and whatnot aren't capable of sorting through all of that and knowing what was created by AI and what was created by humans, we could get this weird cannibalistic system where it starts feeding on itself like an Ouroboros. And then I don't know what that would do. I would imagine that it would just amplify all of the things. And so the weird things we see with hands and a lot of the issues we saw early on, I think would probably come back and be massively amplified. And it's just really intriguing. I'm wondering what will happen there. I would also imagine that the smart people that are devising these systems have probably done things to prevent that from happening. But again, these are just the random, like, I've spent too much time going through AI stuff in science fiction novels and video games. So let's see what happens with all of this. But yeah, it's just been popping back up into my brain and showing its ugly or interesting or awkward head in the last week or so. As kind of a logical branching point from that, though, the joy to keep creating daily seems like it might be one of the things that's been pushing AI art out of our collective minds. Because it was scary there for a while, and I think that it probably still is in a lot of regards. But at the end of the day, so many of us that create have the dream of perhaps doing this professionally, but I think at the foundational level, the desire is just simply to create. You know, if you took away a lot of the financial needs, the economic incentives for people to work, a lot of people that, you know, work just standard jobs would get rid of them. They would quit them, because the job is just a means to an end. It allows them to make the money to provide the lifestyle for themselves and their family that they want to. But the weird part is for artists and musicians and things like that, for them, for us, like, if you took all of that away, if I no longer had the need to pay for my mortgage or to pay for all of these, you know, economically consuming things in my life, I would still paint, I would still draw, I would still create. In fact, that might even be more freeing. So it's this weird situation where artists have to create. So many of us, at least, have to create. It's part of our joy. It's part of the reason we get up in the morning. And so we can't exist in this perpetual negativity. Now, I know some artists, many artists, in fact, can pull lovely, crazy, intimidating, beautiful things from the negativity. I find personally that it's much harder for me to create when I'm not of, like, sound mind. When I'm stressed about things, when I'm upset about things, you know, an altercation with a friend or just being overly worried about a friend can make it harder for me to produce art. But the more, even as I'm saying that, I'm thinking, like, it's actually less about the execution and it's more about, like, the ideation. Like, I can sit down, I suppose, when I'm moody and work on something if it's already been started. Like, I could resume a drawing like you're seeing happen in the background here, where I'm working from reference, where I'm, you know, just executing. I can do that when I'm, like, angry. I can do that when I'm upset. But I find it very difficult to create new ideas, to come up with new things entirely, to start something from scratch when my emotional state isn't, at its peak. And I think that's part of the reason why we have a tendency as artists to push some of the negative things out, so that we can get back to our safety nets, get back to what it is that we need to do and what we want to do. And that's part of the beauty of this, is that art is not this thing we do because we can. It's not this thing we do to earn money. It's this thing we do because we want to, because we need to, because it's good. Because creating things makes the world a better place, because it's fundamentally human. And I think that really creating art is one of those things that is just fundamental to being human. I heard somebody else talking earlier today, just kind of a philosophical conversation about how the poets and the artists are often the first people to realize what the issues are going to be in our world. They start dissecting things earlier. And I thought that was so intriguing, because at least here in the United States, we've taken such a hard stance against the arts because they're incalculable. Why would we teach art and music in class? Because these cannot be standardized tests and, standardized tested. But that's the thing, right? Like, the best things in life can't be tested. Like, how do you have a standardized test for love? How do you have a standardized test for whether you're a good parent or not, or whether your parents were good? How do you have a standardized test for friendship? Like, these are the things that unequivocally are the best things in life, the things that make life worth living. Can you have a standardized test for whether this food is more delicious than this other? How do you account for nostalgia? Are we going to go back to nostalgia being a diagnosable, ill like we did long ago? Probably not, but the best things in life are incalculable. You can't devise a test or an exam to figure out if they exist. We still don't have anywhere near a perfect system to determine whether, whether a couple is compatible or not. You just have to sort through that, and reality is tough, and you're going to have your heart broken, and that's how you figure out, enough about yourself to figure out what you need in a partner. So you pull art and music out of schools because you can't standardize test it. And what do you see? You see a lack of joy in the schools. You see a lack of continuity. You see robotic behaviors and robotic teachers and robotic curricula. And you see teachers that want to get out, and you see students that drop out, and you see students that do it because they think it's right or because it's the way the system is structured, and then they get into college and they're like, this is soulless and I don't want to do this anymore. The system is broken when we try to make it entirely about what can be tested and what can be evaluated. And I think artists and poets know this instinctively. We know that the best things in the world are amorphous and ethereal, and they have to be understood through experience, and they have to be understood through time, and maybe they can't be entirely understood, but you can only get into that and get through that a little bit by putting your time and energy and experience and yourself and vulnerability into this realm. And so we end up in this weird situation where we have to create, because if we don't, we're dissatisfied with existence. And in creating, we explore things that make us more human, and that perhaps are what the masses need as well. And there are probably the vast majority of people in the world are not creative in the sense that artists are creative. I know that might be a little controversial. I know that there are a lot of people that believe everyone is creative. I do not. I'm happy to have that conversation, and I'm happy to be wrong. So if you see things differently, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. And again, it's not a hard stance, but I think that it's a mental structuring, and some people don't have that, in the same way that not everyone's built to be an engineer or a doctor. And that means that we as creatives have something special and unique to bring to the table. And that makes sense. If you look at humanity as a whole, we're quite different. We're quite different across the board. You find similarities regardless of race or location or ethnicity or religion or any of those things. People are people, but humanity is different from itself. It is this massive coalescence of thing, And then inside of that, you've got all these different kinds of humans. I think sometimes things like the Myers-Briggs test, I don't remember if it's 12 or 16. I think it's 16 personalities, which would make sense because of the way it's structured. So, but yeah, the Myers-Briggs tests will tell you a lot of things about different personality types and how you understand the universe and reality. And I've found, though, no system in that realm is going to be perfect. That system has provided me with a lot of understanding about how I process the world and how others process the world. And it's helped me to understand my friends, my family, and even myself at a better level. And it justifies in some ways some of my oddities and some of the things that I do in my overanalysis of things. And it also can help me to understand a little bit about things that I need to work on, that I need to work on being more empathetic and more understanding, and to value emotions at a higher level than I do naturally. And frankly, just being married did that to me, because when you have a partner, for just day-to-day activities, you learn that your way of doing things is not the universal truth. It is simply your way of doing things. And for me, who basically looked at logic as the end-all, having a wife who is more emotional than me, after some time, I went, oh, emotions are valid. And it felt like the whole universe opened up. So, I have no idea how we got in the weeds here, where it was like talking about poets and whatnot, and now we're talking about like emotions and their validity. But this is the ramblings. This is what happens when I'm drawing and contemplating and thinking about things. So, yeah, here we are. Oh, we got a cat. Speaking of ramblings, I grew up being allergic to cats, but it was kind of just a spur of the moment thing. My allergies are not nearly as bad as they are, and so we ended up with a cat. And I think artists in general, and introverts specifically, like cats. They're very different than dogs, and we've only had this cat for like 2 weeks, and it's been interesting. There's been, again, a lot of contemplation and like wrapping my head around like, what's going on? How does this cat? What does it mean to cat? What is the platonic ideal of cat? And they're just so different than dogs. I grew up with dogs all the time, and so to have this little cat that is needy in a different way than a dog. It wants attention, but it doesn't necessarily want it actively all the time. And then also, it's so independent and can exist on its own. I love not having to like take an animal outside all the time so it can poop in the yard and then I get to go clean up the poop later. Like the litter box thing, though I'm slightly worried about like lingering smells, the litter box thing seems so ideal and so nice compared to a dog. But like, cats can get up on counters. Like I didn't know that. I mean, academically and intellectually, I knew that like that would be a possibility. It's just been all these things. But what's been lovely is as I've been sitting in the living room or the dining room at night after everyone goes to bed, and I'm just sitting there drawing, and then I hear a little meow, and the cat's like sleeping next to me on the next dining room chair, dining table chair, the chair next to me. It's just sweet. It's nice, and it's rewarding to have this other living thing in my realm, and I've really been enjoying that. I've really been valuing that. So we'll get updates about the cat, I suppose, as time goes on, and at some point I'll have some pictures to show, because she's a sweet little love. And her name is Snorkel, and we're gonna just keep that name, because how can you change a cat's name when the cat's named Snorkel? So I guess today we got to talk about AI art, and a little bit about cats, and a little bit about how I process the universe, which I don't know if that was entertaining, but sometimes the sketchbook sessions are just rambling. They're just my train of thought and my stream of consciousness. But I'm always just hopeful that there's some snippets of this that are either just entertaining enough that you can keep working on your artwork, or that there are pieces of yourself that this analysis helps with. The goal here is hopefully not to be a vain thing, hopefully not to be stroking of my ego. It's simply just to hopefully be vulnerable and real and give you the chance to see into just one other artist's mind. and how I process the world. And I'm not so presumptuous to assume that I'm correct and that I'm approaching all these things correctly. And I'm sure you'll see that over time, where I'll come up with ideas and concepts that I'll throw out there, and you'll be like, that's probably wrong, Zach. And it's like, yeah, it probably is, but like, we're not going to get to truth without going through a lot of wrong first. And that's just kind of how I approach things. So I hope this has been beneficial to you. If you're still here at the end, I appreciate it. If you're still here in the end, I would just ask that you write in the comments stream of consciousness, just because it would be interesting to see who all actually made it to the end here. But anyway, if you've got any suggestions for topics you'd like me to ramble about in the next sessions, things that you'd like me to draw, feel free to shove that in the comments as well. I appreciate all of you tremendously. Thanks for being here and for listening to my rambles. So have a good one, y'all. I'll see you soon.